Reminder in case you missed yesterday's show, this headline right here, NAACP issues travel advisory in Florida. And that advisory read, Florida is openly hostile towards African Americans, people of color, and the LGBTQ plus individuals. Before traveling to Florida, please understand that the state of Florida devalues and marginalizes the contributions of and the challenges faced by African Americans and other communities of color. That is coming from the NAACP Board of Directors. Now, someone who had to open their mouths about that was Texas Senator Ted Cruz, because apparently Ted thinks Texas is a part of Florida. And here is what he said on Twitter, or what he wrote on Twitter, and we will read it. This is bizarre and utterly dishonest. In the 1950s and 1960s, the NAACP did extraordinarily good helping lead the civil rights movement. Today, as if this mofo can talk on behalf of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., but this is what he wrote. Today, Dr. King would be ashamed of how profoundly they've lost their way. You know what? People kill me, especially. Okay, let me just keep going. He was quickly checked for his BS by none other than the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s daughter, Reverend Dr. Bernice King. Let's just go ahead and put up with Dr. King, the other Dr. King, put out there. She said, what my father would be deeply concerned about is the harmful discriminatory legislation in Florida. Let's just go ahead and drop the mic on this, Ted, because you just got checked. Because you can't come back from this check, from this butt whooping you just got from Dr. Bernice King. She didn't even have to say a whole lot. What my father would be deeply concerned about is the harmful discriminatory legislation in Florida. And then she put up a picture of her daddy. Mic check, Ted, on you. Now, and yours truly, being me, I was on News Nation last night with Chris Cuomo, and I spoke to that discriminatory legislation. Take a look.
Governor Ron DeSantis is absolutely out of control. By way of example, Dwayne Wade, one of the greatest players in the NBA, he took his family out of Florida because he has a transgender daughter. This man is fighting Disney for all the wrong reasons. He acts like he wants to box with Mickey and Minnie Mouse or Donald and Daisy Duck, instead of doing what is right on behalf of all the people in that state. Totally trying to erase Black history. It's more than a dog whistle, it's a bullhorn. And Chris, one other point, YouGov and Yahoo and YouGov did a poll in May. They polled wokeness. How do you feel about this? 41% of those people who were polled, 41% cared about that. You know what they cared about more? They cared about inflation by 74%. And even racism as an issue in this country polled higher than the so-called war on wokeness. Governor Ron DeSantis is driving people out of that state, and he really is very reminiscent of some of the segregationist governors from the 50s and 60s in this country.
Yeah, he is. And so for Ted Cruz to fix his mouth and invoke the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. in such a manner is not only a classic example of white-splaining, it is another example of how the GOP continues to attempt to rewrite history or erase Black history. Sister Rodriguez.
Yeah, it's funny. What's enviable about that Republican Party is that they will stick together through thick and thin. They can hate each other, and the Democrats could really learn something from them, because when they band together, they make it happen. They will bite their nose to spite their face, but they do it in unison, and it's very interesting. I don't want to hear nothing about no big dummy who cooks bacon with a gun, who leaves his state in a state of emergency, who is let somebody call his wife ugly and then turned around and licked his shoes. I have no respect for Ted Cruz, and therefore I consider the source. I don't want to hear nothing that he has to say. He needs to shut his mouth talking about Black people, for Black people, to Black people. He ain't qualified, and don't nobody want to hear what he has to say. Sit down and be quiet, sir.